Hi, everyone. Welcome to our channel, i.e. Canal 5. Douglas Macgregor critiques the military capabilities of European countries, particularly focusing on France, Britain, Germany, and the United States. He describes the French army as ill-equipped for significant engagements, likening it to a force designed for safaras in Africa. He portrays the British army as limited in capacity, suggesting it could only handle emergencies in Belize or riots in Belfast. Macgregor highlights the near dismantling of the once formidable from an army, emphasizing the substantial time required for its recovery. Lastly, he mentions recent cuts in the U.S. Army due to recruitment challenges, indicating a recurring pattern of reductions over time by military leadership. He asserts that NATO consistently fails to adapt or strengthen its military forces, opting instead to diminish them by reducing battalions and companies. He characterizes NATO's hand as weak in contrast to Russia's robust military posture. He highlights recent Russian actions, including the movement of long-range ballistic missiles, as clear signals of their seriousness. In contrast, he criticizes NATO's lack of seriousness, particularly evident in the Ukrainian conflict. He predicts Ukraine's eventual loss of territories like Kharkov and Odessa to Russia, emphasizing historical ties and geopolitical realities. He also discusses Moldova's precarious situation, with Transnistria seeking Russian support against Moldovan and Western pressures. He anticipates further Russian expansion into historically Russian territories, potentially altering Ukraine's borders significantly. He concludes by dismissing optimistic narratives about Ukraine's future and urges for pragmatic dialogue with Russia to avert further escalation. It's not just disappointing, it's a manifestation of corruption and deceit. Those in power refuse to acknowledge their wrongdoings, instead opting to deceive the public. There, the regard for the Ukrainian people is evident. Their primary concern lies in serving their own interests and those of their associates. Zelensky's presidency is merely a means to facilitate deals with Western corporations and politicians like Schumer. This behavior is akin to gangsterism, devoid of any diplomatic or strategic rationale. Recent statements by figures like Victoria Nuland reveal the self-serving nature of foreign aid, which primarily benefits domestic industries and political figures. Moreover, the sale of weapons and technology only fuels global conflicts, enabling entities like drug cartels to obtain advanced weaponry. The situation in Ukraine is a testament to the exploitation orchestrated by Ukrainian elites who profit at the expense of their own nation's stability and security. NATO's survival amidst the Ukrainian crisis is highly uncertain. While the fate of the European Union remains unclear, NATO faces significant challenges ahead. Historically, European nations found solidarity with the United States due to the looming threat posed by the Soviet Union after World War II. However, NATO's effectiveness has waned over time. The narrative of Ronald Reagan single-handedly defeating the Soviet Union is a simplification. The Soviet Union collapsed from internal issues rather than external pressure. Similarly, NATO's current portrayal of Russia as a primary adversary is misleading. Putin's goals do not include reviving the Soviet Union. Rather, he acknowledges its flaws. Despite mainstream media's portrayal, European citizens are beginning to question the narrative, albeit slower than Americans due to media censorship. Polls reveal a reluctance among European populations, particularly in Poland, to engage in conflict with Russia. The Polish army, though well-trained, is not prepared for such a confrontation, mirroring NATO's overall unpreparedness. The insistence on military posture contrasts sharply with the urgent need to address domestic issues like border security. The prospect of regional conflicts in the Middle East or Eastern Europe and potential confrontation with China does not align with American interests. Priorities should focus on internal security and law enforcement rather than external conflicts, which hold little relevance to the American populace. In the past, politicians have often reacted to public opinion rather than leading it. The current focus on border issues reflects this trend, with Biden's visit to the border being more symbolic than effective. Despite political rhetoric, there's a pervasive sense of inaction driven by self-enrichment and corruption within the political machinery. Real change seems unlikely without a severe economic crisis or financial collapse. The border situation, a recurring concern over the decades, persists with significant consequences, such as the alarming number of Americans dying from fentanyl poisoning, much of which originates from Mexico. Suggestions to engage in conflicts with countries like China only exacerbate existing challenges, considering the nation's limited capacity to manage regional warfare effectively. Historical examples like Woodrow Wilson's response to Pancho Villa's incursion illustrate decisive action taken to secure the border, contrasting sharply with current political discourse. The need for tangible action outweighs mere rhetoric. Yet substantial progress remains elusive amidst political inertia. Looking at Europe's current state, particularly Western Europe, reveals a troubling picture of economic instability and political disarray. Great Britain, facing serious economic challenges, lacks viable leadership alternatives, potentially paving the way for figures like Starmer to assume power. France remains in a state of perpetual upheaval, while Germany grapples with internal issues motivated by past leadership decisions. Italy, too, confronts significant problems. In contrast, Russia, despite Western perceptions, boasts a stable society and a thriving economy, surpassing Germany as Europe's top economy. The idea that Russia is weak and easily bullied reflects a gross misconception, akin to the self-delusions of past predictions. Russia's naval capabilities, particularly its formidable submarine force, pose a significant threat to any surface fleet. Additionally, Russia's strength lies in its land power, similar to historical Germany, rendering air and naval superiority insufficient for defeating it. The effectiveness of NATO aircraft against Russian air defenses remains untested due to significant risks. The notion of a swift NATO victory over Russia is nonsensical, as any conflict would likely devolve into a protracted and grueling stalemate. Just Russia's cohesive society and global support, especially from China and Iran, further bolster its position. Moreover, Russia's accumulation of gold and its pursuit of gold-backed currency challenge the dominance of fiat currencies. The opacity surrounding Western gold reserves, including those in Fort Knox, raises legitimate concerns about their authenticity. In essence, the West finds itself in a precarious position. Ukraine, relying on bluffs while Russia maintains a credible stance, backed by concrete capabilities. But it means anyone with a shred of humanity would acknowledge the gravity of the situation and the need for decisive action. The suffering and turmoil in Ukraine are deeply troubling, and in many ways, a consequence of delayed responses. Putin's warnings over the years regarding NATO expansion and Ukraine's status were clear signals that went unheeded. The idea of a neutral Ukraine serving as a buffer between NATO and Russia was a sensible proposal that could have prevented this crisis. Instead, the rush to integrate Ukraine into NATO's sphere has only fueled tensions and raised the specter of conflict. The current government in Washington, characterized by duplicity and deceit, lacks the credibility needed to engage constructively with Russia. A fundamental overhaul of leadership in Washington is necessary to rebuild trust and pursue meaningful diplomacy. While some politicians may mean well, genuine change is unlikely until entrenched interests are uprooted. Similarly, Europe faces its own challenges, with questions arising about the longevity of leaders like Schools and Macron. New faces in governments may offer fresh perspectives and opportunities for diplomacy. The complexities of Ukraine's demographics and historical boundaries underscore the need for regional solutions, with Europe better positioned to lead such efforts. Europe's long history of border changes and demographic shifts highlights the efficacy of local approaches to conflict resolution. Ultimately, really extricating ourselves from this quagmire and allowing regional actors to take the lead is essential for lasting peace and stability.